This is a world of individuals, and it is the sum of individual life that guides the world for good or for evil. As we have opportunity, so we have also responsibility. And even to the least, there's a duty that we cannot evade. The Mobile-Tensas River Delta is a magical place, inhabited by indigenous populations as far back as 5,000 years. The Delta has, often unwillingly, played host to colonial powers, foreign governments, and international merchants, all vying for a piece of what the Delta has: unparalleled natural resources, rich biodiversity, and unsurpassed beauty.
I'm Casey Calloway, and I'm the executive director and baykeeper for Mobile Baykeeper. And I have been with the organization for 21 years this past August. I can tell you absolutely that coastal Alabama is different than the rest of the state. We have water all around us. There are 5,000 miles of shoreline in these two coastal counties. That's not including the state, which has the rivers as our seal. We know the importance of water in the state of Alabama, but in the coast, it's our bread and butter. It's how we live, eat, work, play every single day.
Russell Ladd. I retired from Thames Battery in 2001, and since then I've been working to publicize the Delta, have people understand the Delta. At one time I took a lot of tours in the Delta. I've kind of gotten old, and that's a little bit strenuous for me, but that's been my function, and I've enjoyed working with all the interests that want to promote the Delta. I started going in the Delta when I was about 11 years old, 10 years old, soon after the Second World War, as we could get gasoline. I've really spent my whole life enjoying the Delta. It's a wonderful recreation area.
The collaborative model is the best model for anything, because it's not just about what one organization can do. It's about how not only nonprofits, but we interface with the governmental sector, that's local, state, and federal, private sector, small business, big industry, and work with individuals who are not affiliated with any nonprofit organization or groups. We call that inclusive environmental stewardship. I'm Mark Birdie. I'm Executive Director of the Alabama Coastal Foundation, which has the mission to improve and protect Alabama's coastal environment through cooperation, education, and participation.
Water is very important to the state, and that's the reason, in particular, like I said before, why people are here. It's because of the water, and that goes back over, we're over 300 years old down here as a community. Wiley Blankenship, Coastal Alabama Partnership.
We've partnered with all the breweries, local breweries in coastal Alabama and upstate as well, because to have good beer, you have to have good water, and so it's a hand-in-hand relationship, and the same with the seafood industry. But they contacted us. They said, we want to do a collaboration brew, which just means that all the breweries, are pitching in their hops to make a beer.
One of the things when we talked about Mobile and Baldwin County, I should have mentioned that almost all of the Delta is owned by Forever Wild. That's important because that's controlled by the state of Alabama. There are some private owners in the Delta. There's, in some areas they have 20 or 30 campsites, and they're all privately owned, but there's not much acreage there. Basically, it's owned and controlled by Forever Wild, which is under the Department of Conservation of the state of Alabama.
I am Vivian Williams Beach. I was born in September the 13th, 1920, 7 miles west of Chatham. My father had a sawmill, was operating a small sawmill, cutting timber. The timber that he cut happened to be on some of our great-grandparents' homestead, which was originally long-leaf pine trees, large pine trees.
Water quality is real, and it's here, and it's very present. And when I started, though, 21 years ago, there was such an us versus them. There was the environment versus jobs. And what Mobile Baykeeper had to do, and the other organizations like us had to do, is really help explain that it is not one or the other, it's both and.
My environmental training really brushed with it probably started in the 1980s before it became a large movement. And our people, I was trained by the people, older generation older than I am, and that was industry wanted a clean environment. Industry wanted their employees to enjoy the Delta. So a clean environment, a clean Mobile Bay, a clean Delta was as important to industry as, excuse me, anything we could do. It's very important.
And so one industry at a time, what we've done is really change how they treat the environment. And as opposed to a commodity or a resource or something you have to write a check for, they're really thinking about how do I protect this, preserve it for future generations. And our people, our own employees want to work and play in this field, so how do we make sure it's there for them?
Alabama has 132,000 miles of streams and rivers, and there's no other place in the country that has more aquatic diversity of life than the state of Alabama. And becoming a statewide organization in 2012 really did broaden our perspective to see whatever happens upstate really does eventually make its way down into the Mobile Bay, into the Gulf of Mexico.
The BP oil disaster, which is approaching its 10th anniversary, certainly changed our world. With that spill, I think that's what, no matter how many times the environmentalist says it, the BP oil disaster was a $1 billion economic hit on Alabama's beaches one summer. The BP oil disaster was an economic disaster because it was an environmental disaster. Those two go hand in hand, and our community really sees it.
As a matter of fact, one of our programs is called the Alabama Oyster Shell Recycling Program. For the restaurants that sell oysters on the half shell, they used to throw them away and pay somebody to take them to a landfill. And it just celebrated its 3rd year anniversary in the end of October. And we've collected over 9.8 million shells from the beginning of that program that would have been in a landfill doing the environment no good.
No oysters in Mobile Bay this year. 0 oysters in Mobile Bay this year. And that is, and we have oysters that are being raised from farms, but we have no natural oysters this year. The entire season was closed for harvesting.
The eutrophication came out in 2010. That was when it was proven or accepted by the scientific community. Right. And then teredo worm, I didn't really realize how important it was. But when you have the dams and when you allow salt water to infiltrate your delta like we've let it do the past 75 years, teredo worm eats your cypress trees. And your cypress trees are the main thing that hold a lot of the delta together.
So how we access the delta, how we tread upon or float upon the delta is very important. We have to be careful. So we want to make sure that people understand how sensitive it is as a place. And the best way for people to educate people is to get them in the delta, not just shut it off and say, well, don't go in there because it's sensitive environmentally, but get them in there so they can appreciate why they need to take care of the delta from a conservationist standpoint.
And I've been all over the world. Mm-hmm. We've been off Alaska, we've been from east to west, north to south. We've been to, with the state of Alabama Forest Department, to the countries of Russia, been to Moscow, all of the different countries over there, and we exchanged our ideas. I'm talking about the United States, our ideas with theirs. And then we were visited in theirs, then they shared their ideas with ours, and we came back and then out of our forestry department, Montgomery. Then all this was, see?
I know that it took 200 years for us to really screw this up. So the age of industrial revolution, it was a long time, 1800s and 1900s. So it's not going to be an overnight fix. We're gonna have to change with these changing times. But I under no circumstances believe we can lose. We've got to keep fighting every single day.
The good Lord took care of you if you was willing to share. And in our family, both our family and our friends we knew, that's what we all did. We shared together. If this neighbor needed something, you gave it to him, or you helped him, or if you're in trouble, you helped them. And when it didn't have anything, we got by with what we had.
Today, the Mobile-Tensaw Delta region is a major economic force for Alabama and the world. Yet this progress comes at a cost, and with accelerating development comes unavoidable environmental challenges.